You're all welcome to this very first presentation, very first class, revision class per se. And I pray that and I urge every one of us that as we're about to begin, perhaps you get a pen and a jotter so that you can be able to jot down some points which I may say, which are not actually found on the slides. Or perhaps you may have doubts, so you write down your questions and subsequently we may be able to discuss them so that we can clarify our doubts. Okay, that said, I remain Dr. Stanley, the presenter for today, and we'll be diving straight into. So we're going to revise Food Science Mock 2020. I don't know which of the regions, whether Southwest or Northwest or Yaoundé Center, whatever may be the case, I will upload the slide. Okay, so today we're going to revise section A and section B, and subsequently, hopefully by tomorrow or within the week, we'll look at the second part, which is section C. Okay, that said, straight into business. Section A, the first question says, exploring the food guideline pyramid enables us to learn about food groups, illustrate and state the importance of this fact. Now, before we start looking at the facts or the importance of this statement, let us first of all have an overview of what a food pyramid is actually. Now, a food pyramid, as we will say, it is actually a graphical, and why would we talk of graphical? Because it has the shape of a pyramid. So it is simply a graphical illustration of the optimal number of servings. And by servings here, what do we mean? We are referring to the quantity of food and the quality of food. Quality, we are referring to what? Which class of food? Is it carbohydrate? Under which food group does it fall? So we're talking of the optimal number of servings to be eaten per day for a healthy well-being. That is what a food pyramid is actually about. And as the name indicates, pyramid, it is simply a pyramid which is made up of 6 groups or 6 food groups, all arranged in the shape of a pyramid. But it should be noted here that most of the times in some food groups you may have 5 food groups. In some food pyramid you may have 5 groups, others may have 6, some may have 4. But the standard for the food pyramid is 6, as you can see from the image below. So judging from this image, you can tell these are the 6 classes of fruits, or the 6 food groups per se. So you have the vegetable and fruit group, you have the cereals group where you have your bread, your pasta, and this mostly where you get your carbohydrates. Then you have the milk, yogurt and cheese, followed by the meat, poultry and fish where you get your protein. Then you have fats, spread and oil, and finally at the top of the pyramid you now have your sweet foods or drinks that have a high content of sugar or salt. And it should be noted here that if you look at the side, you'll realize that these are the servings. So for the first class of food or the first food group, which is vegetables, the serving is 5 to 7 servings. Then followed by the next, we have 3 to 5, we have 3, we have 2, and these other ones are sparingly. And when we talk sparingly, what do we mean? You're supposed to consume them very little. You don't consume too much of it because they may have long-term effects. And these are mostly those that contribute to obesity and overweight. So that's why you see them at the top of the margin. So what are we saying? This food pyramid is simply there to give us an indication of how you eat. So on a daily basis, whatever thing that you consume in the name of food, you must make sure that the majority, the bulk of that food that you consume comes from this group, which is vegetables and fruits. That's why you see it there. If you look at the size, you see it is the biggest. As you move up, the size decreases or reduces. And that's the next group, which is the cereals. where you obtain your carbohydrate like the cassavas, the rice, maize, and most of all those other cereals. This is the group. And then you move again further, you see that the size further decreases. So this simply gives you an indication that this is your plate of food. Majority of it must consist of vegetables, followed by this, and this. Then these ones should be consumed sparingly. How important is this? I am now trying to give the importance of that statement, of that fact. First, it helps to facilitate healthy eating. How is that possible? Because from the pyramid, you can be able to tell which class of food or which food group you're supposed to consume the most. So by the time you are planning your meal for the day, you should be asking yourself, does this meal that I'm about to eat, does it consist of mostly vegetables and fruit? Does it consist mostly of cereals, or what else? So with that knowledge, you are able to plan your meal, and that will facilitate a healthy eating, and it will also ensure a balanced diet. Why not? Because by the time you are preparing your meal, you know that okay, I have able to include this one from this class of food, this one from this group, this one from this group, and so on and so forth. Then after that, we now talk of variation. Now, in order for me to illustrate variation, let's move back. If you look at the pyramid, you'll realize that under each of those food groups, there are different classes of food, there are different types of food. For example, if you look at vegetables and fruit, you'll realize that you have green vegetables, you have carrots, you have cabbage, and so on and so forth. So when we talk of variation, what do we mean? Today you may decide to consume green vegetable, tomorrow you decide to consume cabbage, the following day you decide to consume carrot or whatsoever. All of those fall under vegetables and fruit. So it provides what? It brings about variation. Next, it also prevents malnutrition, because at the end of the day, when you consult your food pyramid, you are able to tell that this your food, the food you are consuming, or the diet you are consuming, is actually deficient in this particular class of food. So with that knowledge, you are able now to make amends for that. Say, okay, since I did not consume this, what can I consume to make up for this class of food or this group? So it therefore helps to prevent or curb malnutrition. And finally, it brings about proper meal planning. This is a case very common with women. We want to plan a meal for the family for a day. You may decide, okay, what am I going to prepare today? You may decide, okay, I'll prepare this particular meal. So before you plan the meal, ask yourself, does it constitute that meal I'm about to plan? Does the majority of it consist of vegetables followed by cereals? Does it have poultry, meat, and fish, and so on and so forth? So with that knowledge, you are able to plan a good meal and not just eat for the sake of eating. The second part, they say classify vegetables with examples, 5 marks. Now, under the classification of vegetables, there are actually so many groups, but I was just able to bring out 6 groups. So the first, we have the leafy vegetables. These are vegetables that actually have leaves on them. That's what we talk of leafy. And we have examples like the bitter leaf, cabbage, green vegetables, etc. Then we have the bulbs, and generally we'll talk of bulbs here. Bulbs are simply most of these vegetables that have layers that you can easily peel. Like for example, if you look at your onions, garlics, and leeks, you see that they're made up of layers. So all of those fall under bulbs. Then you have the roots, examples like carrots, potato, beetroot. Then we have the fruits, where you have your tomatoes or your cucumber. Then tubers like cassava and yam. Nuts like the groundnut and the cashew nut. Pulse like the soya beans and the lentil. Pulses are generally like grains, but they come in pots. If you look at, when I talk of pots, they have a covering. Like if you look at beans, you see that beans is found in a particular covering. That structure that covers it is what they call pot. So any grain that comes in that form, will refer to them as pulse. That's why you have soya beans here and lentils. Okay, so briefly explain the following as used in food preparation. Now, the first is aspartame. Now, generally, aspartams are artificial sweeteners. Sweetener, something that makes you say you want to make your drink to be sweet, or you want to make something to become sweet, you add your sweetener. Now generally what we mostly use is sugar, but apart from sugar we also have other types of sweeteners like the artificial ones, example being the aspartame, and it has an advantage in that it contains few calories as compared to sugar, very few calories, and as a result of that the food or beverage, because of that, it is 20 times sweeter than sugar. So because it is 20 times sweeter than sugar, what does it mean? You therefore need just a small quantity of it to have the same effect that a large quantity of sugar will produce, whereas that large quantity of sugar is going to give you so much calories, whereas in the case of aspartame, just a small amount of it and a small calorie, you have the same effect, same sweetness. That's why I refer to them as artificial sweeteners. So less is used for sweetness, thus lowers calories in food and beverages. Okay, it is generally used by diabetics who need low calories intake, and that can be explained by the fact that you actually need just a small quantity of it to produce the same effect that a large quantity of sugar will produce. So I want to believe that point is actually clear. Spices. Now, when we talk of spices, what do we mean? We are referring to the seeds, fruit, root, the barks, or any plant substance primarily used for what? Flavorings, coloring, or to preserve food. I repeat, seeds, fruit, root, barks, or any plant substance. Now, this should not be confused. Spices should not be confused with herbs. Take note. Spices should not be confused with herbs. When we talk of herbs, what do we mean? We are referring to the leaves, the flowers, or stems of plants that are used for the same purpose of flavoring or to garnish. So take note of the difference. Spices, we are referring to what? The seed, the fruit, the root, and the bark of a plant. But when we talk of herbs, we are referring to what? The leaves, the flowers, and the stem of a plant, all of which are used for flavorings. So please take note of those differences. So we have a spice. Then it is used in the preparation of seasoned soups and picklings. So you want to season your food, most of the times you put your spices and it gives a great flavor, and it also help to enhance flavor and taste of food. As for the bran, now bran, otherwise known as Miller's bran, you can also call it Miller's bran. It is simply the hard outer layer, or what we generally call the husk of a cereal grain. The husk of a cereal grain, the outer layer, or what they call seed coat or whatsoever. That is what they refer to as a bran, but that of a cereal grain. Take note, cereal grain. Now, what do they provide? They provide an extra source of fiber in food. For example, brown sugar. Now, if you look at brown sugar and white sugar, they are typically the same. The only difference is brown sugar is simply white sugar to which this bran has been added. That is the difference. I repeat, brown sugar is simply white sugar to which bran has been added, and this bran happens to be rich in fiber. So somebody consuming white sugar is simply consuming what? Calories. But another person consuming brown sugar consumes calories, and at the same time the person consumes fiber, which is another class of food. That is more of the reason why they say brown sugar is more healthy, nutritious than our normal white sugar. So take note of that. Then what else does it do? It also helps to provide bulkiness, increase the quantity, bulkiness, and it is also a good source of thiamine and riboflavin. said, we now move to question 2, which says, compare the nutritive content of leafy vegetables with roots and tubers. Now, generally, when we talk of leafy vegetables, one of the components that are very rich in, the nutrients that are very rich in, there are two components that are very rich in, that is fiber and vitamins. Fiber and vitamins. Take note of that. That's why you see here, you see high compared to roots and tubers, they are low. Then another thing, they are very low in energy. That's more of the reason why people who are obese, they usually recommend them to consume what? More of vegetables and fruit, for the simple fact that no matter the quantity you consume, it does not contribute to any calorie. It does not give you any calorie. So it simply fills your stomach, gives you that satisfaction, satiety. But at the end of the day, no calorie consumed. That's why you see here low and you see here high. Then for carbohydrates, obviously the roots and the tubers will have more of it. Then proteins too, more in leafy vegetables as compared to the roots and tubers. Now, differentiate between fortification and enrichment. Now, when we talk of enrichment, what do we mean? Nutrients that were lost during food processing have been added back. Imagine you're about to process cassava, for example, you want to transform raw cassava to gari. It is very obvious that in the process of converting it from one form to the other, some of the nutrients will be lost. Take for example, cassava may contain vitamin C, and in the course of processing it from raw to gari, from the raw cassava to gari form or the gari state, most of this vitamin C is lost. So at the end of the day, if you take vitamin C and add it back to your gari, what you are doing is simply enriching. So that's what we refer to as enrichment. You are adding something that was lost. It was previously there. You are adding it back. But the contrary for fortification. Fortification, in this case, you are adding something that was absent, completely absent from the beginning. That particular nutrient was absent from the beginning, and it mostly applies with what? Vitamins and minerals. And the case is, typical example is the case of our normal Maggi cubes that we use in the kitchen. It has been fortified with iron. So originally, iron was never a part of it, any of the ingredients. But at the end of the day, because they want to improve on our health, it make people consume the iron so that they should not be deficient in it. What do? They now add it to the Maggi. So that is an example of what? Fortification. Now, the next question says, examine the role of the following in food science. First, hydrogenation of fats. Hydrogenation of fats. Now, before we start going into the details of that, I want us to first of all have an overview how fat actually comes into play, or arises. Generally, fat arises from a reaction between one glycerol and three fatty acids, three molecules of fatty acids, resulting to what? Fat and oil, which we generally call lipids. And this reaction is a condensation reaction. We generally refer to it as esterification. Now, these fats, again, generally, as much as we call them fats, but there is a difference between fat and oil, because generally fats are solid at room temperature, whereas oils are liquid at room temperature. And that's why you will say, you will refer to butter as fat, and you will refer to your cooking oil as what? Oil. So generally, we would say there are two forms. They are saturated and the unsaturated. Or we talk of unsaturated fat. Unsaturated fat is simply what? Fat that is liquid at room temperature, which is the oil. While the saturated fat, on the other hand, is that which is solid at room temperature. Now, for the saturated fats again, there is a presence of single bonds, that is carbon to carbon single bonds only. Take note of that, only. Whereas for the unsaturated fats, there is a presence of double and triple bonds. And it is because of the presence of these double and triple bonds that unsaturated fats are hydrogenated in order for them to become saturated, and they adopt the state. They become more of solid than liquid. We are going to see that in the next slide. But for now, let's just finish with this part. Then again, saturated fats contain excess cholesterol, unlike unsaturated fats, which contains low amounts of cholesterol. Next part, we say saturated fat, just as the name indicates, saturated. Remember, this saturated here simply means that what? Surplus of what? Hydrogen atoms. Saturated, many hydrogen atoms. Why in this case unsaturated? Unsaturated, it simply means that what? There are not enough hydrogen atoms. That's why we talk of less hydrogen. And this less hydrogen comes as a result of what? The presence of its double bonds and its triple bonds. Because remember, carbon can only accommodate what? 4. So if it already has 2 occupied here, there's only room for what? 2 more. In this case, it has 3 occupied already, so it can only accommodate 1 extra, as compared to this one where you have just a single bond, so it can accommodate 3 extra. That's the reason why hydrogenation is possible here, but not here. Take note. Then finally, we have examples of saturated fats like butter and unsaturated fats like vegetable oil. Okay. Now, back to the question proper. I now want to answer the question properly. Generally, when we talk of hydrogenation, what do we mean? Hydrogenation is the process of treating oil, which from our previous slide we will refer to it as what? Unsaturated, which means that what? There's a presence of double and triple bonds. There is room for more hydrogen to come in. So it is a treatment of oils, which are generally unsaturated, with hydrogen gas in the presence of a catalyst to make them more solid or spreadable, generally referring to what? Saturation or saturated fat. Or talk of spreadable here, what do we mean? It's just like fat. It's just like a butter. You can easily take butter and you spread on your bread. That's spreadable, but it's kind of difficult with the oil. So how does this reaction come into play? We have a typical example here. This is our saturated fat, which is oil, and it has double bonds and triple bonds reacting with the hydrogen gas in the presence of a catalyst. The details of the nature of the catalyst not so important. You can look at that in chemistry. So to give you a saturated fat which has just what? Single bonds only. So that's the reaction. Now, what role does it play? It helps to prolong the shelf life of food. Prolonging the shelf life of food, which therefore means that what? Maybe the food was supposed to last for if the food was supposed to last for say 1 week, but through this process that food can now last for a month. So you extend the shelf life, you prolong the shelf life of the food, so the food retains its quality for a longer period of time. Also, it helps to maintain flavor stability. Now in most cases with foods, you realize that as time unfolds, as time goes on, at one point in time you realize that the flavor starts depreciating, starts decreasing. But through this reaction, it therefore enables that what? The flavor of that particular food item is maintained, it is stable. And finally, the changes in physical properties of the fat. So it brings about a change in the physical property. Maybe it used to be solid, it used to be liquid. Due to the reaction, it now becomes solid. And because it is solid, it therefore means that what? It has affected the melting range, because it's now going to melt at a particular temperature. So it brings about changes in physical properties. Lecithin. Lecithin, it is simply a phospholipid manufactured by the liver, and it is found in many foods as a major constituent of the cell membrane. Now, we need here to remind ourselves of the fact that these lecithin are used as additives in margarine and salad dressings. Also, they act as emulsifiers. When we talk of emulsifier, what do we mean? It simply helps to make it such a way that oil and water can mix up and give rise to a homogeneous substance or a homogeneous mixture. That's the role of an emulsifier. Enables that liquid or water and oil can mix and attain homogeneity. That said, the next part is they act as antioxidants. And what is the role of an antioxidant? It's simply there to neutralize free radicals in the body. Now, generally different types of biochemical reactions take place in our body. Molecules are broken down every second. Now, the general case is that most of the times some molecules are broken down and they give rise to some molecules, the small molecules which we refer to as radicals, free radicals. These molecules have no key role in the body. They simply loiter around the body, and once they accumulate to a particular extent, they may start causing harm. At one point in time, they may start causing harm, or they predispose you to certain diseases. So antioxidants are therefore there to capture all these free radicals such that you are not exposed or predisposed to certain diseases. And finally, they act as flavor protectors. Enzymatic browning. Now, generally, when we talk of enzymatic browning, what do we mean? It is simply an oxidation reaction that takes place in foods. In most cases, we are referring to foods like fruits and vegetables, with the help of an enzyme which we generally refer to as polyphenol oxidase, causing the foods to turn brown, so the color changes. And a typical example that can be illustrated with this is if you look at apple. If you cut your apple, let's say cut it in the middle, and you have two slices. If you allow those slices exposed like that to air for a period of time, say 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, at one point in time you realize that the color starts changing. The same thing applies to vegetables. If you happen to prepare your vegetable today, say you don't want to cook it today, so you just prepare, slice it, and you want to preserve it, say you want to cook it in 2 or 3 days. Generally, what do? You steep it in warm water or hot water, then you remove, squeeze, and you put in the fridge. Why are you doing that? You are trying to retain the color so much so that even if it stays in the fridge or in the freezer for 1 week, the day you prepare is still able to retain that particular color. But failure to do so, what happens? Once you put in the fridge and you remove, what happens? You realize that the color has changed drastically. That change in color is as a result of what? Oxidation reaction due to this polyphenol oxidase. So when you steep it now in water, what are you trying to do? You are trying to inactivate or destroy all these enzymes so that oxidation reactions will not go on, bringing about a change in color. Take note of that. So generally, enzymatic browning results to what? Changes in certain aspects such as the color, which is very visible, the flavor, and the nutritional value. So all these aspects are affected, and it must be noted here that enzymatic browning is one of the problematic things in the food industry, because it is very difficult for you to control them, because by the time you are attempting to destroy the enzymes, it is affecting 1 or 2 aspects of that food. So at the end of the day, it tends to be very problematic. Tocopherol. Now, that's another name for what? Vitamin E. And generally, they act as what? Antioxidants, which we explained in the last slide as being there to neutralize these free radicals that loiter around in our body in order to preserve us, protect us from being predisposed to certain diseases. Next point, it preserves foods or oils from being rancid. When we talk of rancidity or rancid, it's simply when oil is broken down and it starts producing some very uncomfortable, unpleasant odors. That's what is meant by rancid. Something, you see, when something is at the point of decaying, it starts producing one foul odor or smell. That is what we refer to as rancid. So the vitamin E or the tocopherol helps to preserve food from being rancid. So in one way or the other, it helps to prolong the shelf life, extend the shelf life such that it does not easily get bad. Then finally, due to their solubility in oil, they help to fortify foods. Remember, we'll talk of fat soluble vitamins, ADEC, vitamin A, D, E, and K. Vitamin E is among. So it is able to dissolve in oil, and because of that, you can now use that and fortify food with. Okay. Section B. The first question under section B says, explain what you understand by body mass index, BMI, in weight management. Now, generally, when we talk of body mass index, it is simply a measure, it is simply a parameter that is used to measure the body fat based on two aspects. The first aspect, your height, measured in meters, and your weight, measured in kilograms. And it applies only, I repeat, only to adult men and women. So you don't apply BMI on children. Whatever value that you have will be faulty. You cannot infer it and you say this person is obese or this person is like this. It is only applicable to adults. Take note of that. Now, it gives an indication whether a person is healthy. Is a person overweight? Is a person underweight? Does a person have a normal weight? Is a person obese? I'm sure those are questions you may be asking yourself. How do you know that this person is normal weight, and so on and so forth? It is through this BMI. It gives you an indication. There's a particular range. Will tell you from year to year, it means the person is like this. From year to year, it means the person is like this, as we are going to see in our next slide. So we'll proceed. It can be calculated using the formula weight in kilograms divided by height squared. Height being in meter, and the SI unit is kilograms per meter squared. Now take note of these units. The standard unit for weight is kilogram, and that for height is meter. The reason why I'm emphasizing on this is because a question may be posed. You may be asked a question where, in which case, they give you the weight of the person, but in grams, and you are given the height in 6 centimeters. So if you now apply this formula directly, it is very certain that your answer will be faulty. So that's the reason why I'm trying to emphasize so much on this unit. So you're supposed to convert that gram to kilogram and convert meters, centimeters to meters in order for you to have the right value. So much so that you can now infer. Okay. So B says, if the weight of an adult woman is 85 kilograms and her height measures 1.4 meters, what will be her BMI? Very simple. You simply apply what we did in the formula that we mentioned in the last slide. But before you do that, what do? You take down the information that has been given. Weight has been given, kilogram. Okay, that means there's no need for conversion. Height has been given in meters. Okay, no need for conversion. But had it been the weight was given in grams, you would have converted that grams to kilograms first. Or say the height was given in centimeters, you would have converted the centimeters to meters before you can start applying your formula. So the next thing, you mention your formula, weight on height squared, and you now start calculating. So at the end of the day, you have a BMI of 43.37 kilograms per meter squared. Do not forget, I repeat, do not forget to mention, to put your SI unit. Very important. So write your observation and the advice you will give her. When you talk of writing your observation, what do they mean? You have obtained a particular value. How can you interpret that value? What does that value mean? That's the meaning of observation. What does it mean? What is the significance of that value? And in order for you to know the significance of that value, you must be well versed with this table, which tells you that what A BMI of 18.5 below 18.5 indicates underweight. Now, for a BMI that is between 18.5 and 24.9 indicates that the person has a normal weight. Take note. And for a BMI that is 25 to 29.9, it means the person is overweight. And a BMI greater than or equals to 30 indicates that the person is obese. So from our calculation in the last slide, we had a BMI of 43.37 kilograms per meter square. So having that value in your mind and looking at this table, what does it therefore tell you? What is the interpretation? What's the significance of that value? Under which group here does that person, that lady, under which group does she fall? Is she underweight? Is she normal weight? Is she overweight? Or is she obese? It is very obvious that she falls under this category, greater than 30, because she is 42. So our observation is that thus she is obese. So what advice can you give to an obese person? What is the advice? The advice here, you are trying to tell the person what he or she should not consume in order for her not to put on more weight, and what the person should do or consume in order for her to cut down with their weight. That is what is meant by advice. So you give the do's and the don'ts. So advice: exercise daily, yes, to cut down, to reduce the calorie. Consume fewer fatty foods, because the fat will instead go and accumulate and bring about more and more weight. Secondly, or thirdly, consume less sugar, sweet, and calories. The more you consume foods that are rich in calories, those calories will simply accumulate and be stored as fat, and the fat will simply do what? Increase your weight, overweight. So you keep on increasing in size. And finally, consume more vegetables. Why are they emphasizing on this vegetable? Remember, when we're looking at vegetable, I told you one of the two key nutrients that they provide is what? Fiber and vitamins. And we said when we're looking at energy, we said they contain no calorie. So you see, it is because of that they are recommending that person to consume more of vegetables, because no matter the quantity that he or she consumes, at the end of the day, she has not consumed any calorie. Everything is blank. That is the importance. So take note. Question 3. They say, propose a suitable day's menu for her for 10 marks. Now, mindful of what we did in the last slide, after giving her all those advice, don't consume this, and so on and so forth. So when you're now trying to plan a menu for her, your menu or your planning should try as much as possible to eliminate or reduce fat and sweet from her menu. And it should try as much as possible to incorporate what? Vegetables and fruits. Because you know that the more she consumes those, it does not contribute to any calorie. But the more she consumes fat and sweet, it is instead going to contribute to more and more calories. So you try to reduce calories, reduce calorie consumption, and encourage her to exercise, so that the excess that has been stored into her as fat can be broken down and used up, so that she can now reduce the size. So when you are planning your menu should have more of what? Vegetables and fruits, and less, very little or no fat and sweet. That is the principle, that's the idea behind this. So there's no particular menu. What I've given here is simply an example, but it does not mean this is the only right answer. Anything can be correct provided it follows that standard: more of vegetables and fruit and less of fat. That is why it is preferable for you to give her, if you want to prepare something, it is preferable for you to boil than to fry, because the more you fry, the more you are increasing the fat. So it's advisable to go in for the boiled than the fried. So for breakfast, you can give her fruit salad. And you know fruit salad contains what? Fiber, vitamins, no calories. nothing lost. Then for second course, you may have Lipton tea with milk and piece of bread. Then for lunch, she may take first course, she may take a collard stew, mixed vegetable salad for a start. Then second course, you may have mixed vegetable soup and boiled unripe plantain. You see, unripe, they emphasize it, unripe. Then for the third course, you may have a sponge cake and custard sauce. Then for supper, for the first course, you may have a cabbage salad. You see, more of vegetable. Second course, you have your dole and yam. You see again, more of what? Vegetable. Then for third course, you may have your sponge cake and custard sauce with lemon juice. So this is just an example. It does not mean this is the only right answer. So there are so many answers in as much as it has more of vegetables and fruit and less of what? The fat, the sweet, and to an extent carbohydrates too, because excess is stored as calories or as fats. Sorry. So under section B, let's say today our communities are experiencing high living standards as there is abundance of agro-food cultivation, imported food products, increased industrial technology and marketing techniques, in bracket a general increase in food security. Now the first question says, outline and explain to what extent ignorance of nutrition has affected the health of individuals. I want us to focus on this. The key word here is ignorance of nutrition. That's a key word. Take note. This is a key word. Ignorance of nutrition. To what extent ignorance of nutrition has affected the health of individuals? Now, I want us to analyze this question together. Let's look at it. They started by assuring you that there is an increase in food security through what means there is increase in living standard, there is abundance of agro food cultivation, there is enough food, and most of it again has been imported from abroad, and there is increase in industrial technology and marketing techniques. So those are all measures to ensure what? Measures to ensure food security and prevent what? Food insecurity. Right? Now, let us, before we dive into it properly, let us first of all digest what food security is all about. When we talk of food security, what do we mean? It is simply the process whereby everybody at every point in time has access to adequate, wow, I like to emphasize so much on this point, adequate, nutritious, and safe food to ensure a healthy and safety lifestyle. That is food security. It means everybody at every point in time has access to food, and not just any type of food that is adequate, that is the right amount, because an adult will not consume the same amount as a child. So everybody has the right amount of food. Nutritious, not just any type of food that provides nutrients, and probably all the classes of food. Nutritious and safe food. Why am I emphasizing so much on this safe? Safe because at the end of the day, you may have a balanced meal, the right amount, has all the classes of food in their right proportions, and so on and so forth. But if by chance that plate of food happens to be contaminated or intoxicated or poisoned, it therefore means that what? Upon consumption, instead of bringing about health, it is instead going to bring about what? Disease, which is not what we want. You are eating food, you are consuming food not to be unhealthy, you are consuming food to be healthy. So the moment the food becomes contaminated, it is no longer safe. That is why food security emphasizes so much on these three aspects: adequacy, nutritious, and safety. in order to ensure what? A healthy well-being. Now, when you look at this question, they have already guaranteed you that there is food security, or there is an increase in food security. So the problem is no longer food insecurity, because there is increase in living standard, there is abundance of food cultivated and that which has been imported, and there's increase in industrial technology. But now they're asking you to align and explain to what extent ignorance of nutrition has affected the health of individuals. What do they mean here? This simply means that what? The government has already done its part. The government has made sure that there is enough food adequacy. That which the country does not even produce, the government has imported from abroad to make sure that what? Everything is nutritious and balanced. To an extent, to have provided for what? Safety. So the food is there, everything is there, everybody has access. But because the consumers or the society or people that make up the society, generally the consumers, are ignorant of nutrition. They don't have any idea about nutrition. They don't know that, they don't even know, all they care about is that what? They eat food. Anything that comes their way, they eat. They don't bother to ask themselves, am I consuming carbohydrate? Have I consumed any protein food today? Have I consumed food from all these classes from all these food groups, following our food pyramid that we did in the first slide? All those things, they don't ask themselves those questions. All they do is what? They eat. They just want to eat. So they are ignorant of nutrition. They don't know the classes of food. They don't know which one is important. They don't know which role this particular food group plays, or this particular food item does in your body. Nothing. They are ignorant about those things, and because of their ignorance, it now affects their health status. So they become unhealthy, not because there is not enough food, referring to adequacy, or because they don't consume the right type of food, referring to nutritious, but simply because they don't have any knowledge of nutrition. They don't know that you have to eat balanced diet, and a balanced diet must constitute of all the classes of food, and these are the classes of food, and these are the different foods that you can eat to obtain this particular nutrient, to obtain this particular. They don't know anything about those. All their own is that what? Anything that comes their way, they eat. And because of that, they may have the food to eat. By the end of the day, they are not healthy, simply because what? They are ignorant. They don't know what they are supposed to eat, and when they are supposed to eat, how much of it they are supposed to eat. And that's why the food pyramid comes into play. It's simply there to guide you to make the right choice, to eat healthy, to plan a healthy meal. So this question, they're trying to tell us that what? How does the society's ignorance about nutrition, how does an individual's ignorance about nutrition affect his health? The food is there is access to the food, but because he is ignorant about nutrition, he does not know which one to eat, how much to eat, where to eat, and so on and so forth. So that is the key behind this question. How your ignorance affects your health. The food is already there, but how does your ignorance affect your health? So let me move now straight to proposals. Now the points, if you look at, I've given them in point form, but when you're answering, of course, you have to elaborate, you have to be explicit. But I'm going to explain each of these points. Now we talk of food hygiene and contamination. Ignorance of nutrition. You are very ignorant of nutrition. You don't know that you can be contaminated if you consume food that is infested with maybe germs or disease-causing microorganisms. So they give you a loaf of bread, you just use your dirty hands and you start eating. You're ignorant. You don't manage your food properly. In the process of preparing the food, maybe you're supposed to wash here, you're supposed to boil here, you don't boil at the right temperature, you don't prepare at the right temperature, and so on and so forth. You just expose everything. If food becomes contaminated, and because it is now contaminated, it affects your health. So it's not because the food is not available. The food is available, but because you do not manage it properly, you do not apply food hygiene, the food was contaminated, and it is now affecting what? Your health. Next point, they say poor or no practice of what? Variation. There is no practice of variation because you don't have a knowledge of what? Nutrition. You don't know that on a food pyramid, it's made up of 6 food groups, and each group there are different food items. For example, under vegetables and fruit, there is cabbage, there is a carrot, there is a green vegetables, and so on and so forth. You don't know that today I can decide to eat vegetables, green vegetable. Tomorrow I eat cabbage. Tomorrow I eat carrot. Tomorrow I eat this one, and so on and so forth. That's what we call what? Variation. That's variation. So you don't practice variation simply because what? You don't even know you. You don't even know that something like that exists. You don't have any idea. You are ignorant. Next point, poor choice of food. You see, poor choice. Some people are very comfortable with some type of food, but you tell them to eat another thing now. They choose by the wrong type of food, and they choose foods of the same group. Today they will eat, for example, they may practice variation, but instead of practicing variation along the food pyramid under each of the food groups, they practice variation only under one particular group. Today they eat fufu, tomorrow rice, tomorrow corn. The next day again, they come back to rice, they move again to wheat, and so on and so forth. Only on that, but they don't complement with the other groups. So there's what? Poor choice of food. Now, poor preparation. Poor preparation. Maybe like vegetables, we both know that when you are preparing vegetables, you don't have to expose them to high temperatures for too long. But vegetables are prepared high temperature, short period of time. Reasons being that most of the vitamins that are present in it are sensitive to heat. So when you overcook them, you are destroying all those destroying all those vitamins. And once they are destroyed, what you simply consume is what? Chaff. So poor preparation, overcooking, you destroy all the nutrients, then you consume chaff and you say you have eaten. You haven't eaten anything. You are ignorant of what? Nutrition. And now it's affecting your health. Poor meal planning. You see, with your knowledge of food pyramid, you know that when I'm planning my meal, the majority of it's supposed to come from what? Vegetables and fruit, followed by cereals, followed by this, and so on and so forth. So you try to make sure that your meal for each day incorporates all those classes of food, and you try as much as possible to practice what? Variation. But because you have no knowledge of what food pyramid, you don't know what food pyramid is, you don't even know what the different classes of food are or what nutrients are, you just plan your meal anyhow. You just wake up today, you feel as to drink gari, you drink your gari. The next day you feel as to eat roasted corn, you eat your roasted corn, you sleep. No. Poor planning. And because there is poor planning, you turn out to be what? Unhealthy. Then unbalanced diet, it goes in line with our food pyramid. You cannot balance it because you don't even know that it's supposed to consume, your balance is supposed to contain this, and that. So you don't even know how to balance it. So it leads to your health being affected. Then food habits, likes and dislikes. Now, generally, you tell somebody, consume this food, take this food. You say, no, I don't like this food. Now, the tendency is you must not consume food simply because you like it. Consume it to obtain the nutrients. Because as much as there are fruits, right, the nutrients that you obtain from orange will not be the same nutrients that you obtain from plum, from a pineapple, for example. It will not be the same nutrients. There are different nutrients. So you try as much as possible to cut across, consume everything what is available, not because you like it, but because you want to obtain what? The nutrients. Your focus is on what? The nutrients, and not on your likes or dislikes. So because of likes and dislikes or food habits, some people tend to neglect or they don't consume a particular type of food, and as a result they deprive themselves of those nutrients which they could have obtained from those food items. Then taboos and traditional norms, or what we call food fallacy, false beliefs about food. For example, you go to some villages, they'll tell you that children are not supposed to eat meat because when they eat meat, they are supposed to they will grow to become thieves. In some places, they'll tell you a pregnant woman does not eat egg, and so on and so forth. So those type of beliefs, at the end of the day, you realize that some people, at the end of the day, they don't consume some type of food, not because they don't have access to it. They have access to the food, but they cannot consume because of their beliefs, because of taboos, and because of that, they deprive themselves of those nutrients. And in one way or the other, it reflects on their health status, and it's affected. And finally, lifestyle. Like generally, if you look at alcoholics, people take a lot of alcohol. They hardly eat. They hardly ever eat today. Simply because you tell somebody to eat, take something and eat. You say no. Drinking is eating twice. Every time you see them, they're drinking. They don't take food. So they're depriving themselves of the food. They focus more on the alcohol, and they're depriving themselves of the food simply because they don't know what role that food plays in their body. To them, they believe that once they consume their alcohol, they are okay. So they deprive themselves of the food, not because the food is not there. The food is there, but because of their lifestyle, they deprive themselves of those nutrients, and in one way or the other, it reflects on their health. So as you can see here, I said be explicit. So he explained this point detailedly. B, B part, which says cardiovascular diseases have been described by health experts as a silent killer. Now, enumerate 4 cardiovascular diseases. Before we start enumerating the cardiovascular disease, I just want us to know what cardiovascular disease are actually, what they are about. Now, very simple. Cardiovascular. When you look at cardio here simply stands for what? It simply stands for heart. Vascular simply stands for what? Blood carrying vessels. And disease. So when we talk of cardiovascular diseases, we are referring to diseases that affect what? The heart and the blood carrying vessels. By that we are referring to what? Arteries, capillaries, and the veins. So that is what cardiovascular diseases are all about. Diseases that affect the heart and the blood carrying vessels. And what are they? We have cardiac arrest, atherosclerosis, myocardial infarction, stroke, high blood pressure, heart failure, and so many others. So if you look at all these diseases that we mentioned here, in one way or other, either they affect the heart or they affect the blood carrying vessels. Myocardia, this one heart, stroke, high blood pressure, heart failure, is either the heart or the vessel, and that is why they are generally referred to as cardiovascular diseases. Okay. Now, explain why they are referred to as silent killers. Yes, they're referred to as hitman. And the reason is very simple. This is simply because they typically have no symptoms. I repeat, no symptoms until after they have done significant damage to your heart and blood vessels. That is when you're now conscious of the fact that I am sick of this, and by then it must have been too late. That's the reason why they refer to as what? Silent killers. Because you may have it, but no one day will you. It's not like other diseases. Like for example, it's not like let me say corona, something. Corona, yeah. Why not corona? You see everywhere on TVs, radios, they tell you when you are sneezing, when you have a running nose, when you have high temperature, vomiting, and so on and forth, you start suspecting. But when you see this cardiovascular disease, they are not like that. They don't show any symptoms. They don't show any. There's not a particular sign that you look at and you say, okay, I start suspecting this thing. No. You just realize it when it has already done so much harm, and you're not trying now to control it a bit. That's why they are referred to as silent killers. No symptoms until they have done so much harm. So unfortunate. That's more of the reason why they always advise children, to try as much as possible to control their lifestyle. Do not consume too much sweet. Do not take this. Do not consume cold water. Do not, and so on and so forth. Because all those things, at one point in time, it may not have any effect on you now when you're still young. But when you now get to that particular age, you now that's when you start realizing that you are suffering from this, you are suffering from that, but you have no idea that it started right far when you were still a child because of your lifestyle, the type of things that you consumed. And so it has now done so much harm that it is now manifesting itself at the final stage when you now get to old age. So that's life. We just have to deal with it. I think the last part of section B, propose nutritional guidelines to prevent these ailments. We have seen that they affect the heart, they affect the blood vessels, And how do they do so? Most of the times it's as a result of what? Deposition of fat along the blood vessels, leading to what? A decrease in the lumen, a decrease in the size, and that may lead to what? High blood. You start having heart failure and so on and so forth, stroke. So what are the things that you can now do or avoid in order for you to be free from these cardiovascular diseases? First, feed more on vegetables, avoiding those that are rich in low density lipoproteins. Low density lipoproteins are generally referred to as what? Bad cholesterol. And why do we say bad cholesterol? Because they contribute, they promote, lead to what? Deposition of fat fragments along what? Along your lumen, along the blood capillaries, which leads to a decrease in your lumen. And once the lumen decreases, what happens? The blood start pumping at higher pressure, leading to high blood pressure. And before you know it, another one comes in, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. So that's more of the reason why we say you consume more of vegetables, but you avoid those that contain or rich in low density lipoprotein, because that is bad cholesterol, unlike high density lipoproteins, which does the contrary. It instead clears off all those deposited fragments or deposited fats along the blood capillaries. It instead helps to clear them off. But this one is very bad. Yeah. So eat little or no fatty food. You see again, they're emphasizing on this fatty food, because what do? They lead to deposition along your capillaries or along your blood vessels, which is very unhealthy. Then finally, take in excess fluids and protein foods with low biological value, e.g. proteins. So generally those from plant origin. And then finally, do exercise to reduce body weight. Sorry about that, it's not busy weight, it is body weight. So you exercise, burn up the extra calories, burn everything, keep shape, keep fit. That's it. You apply that, and I believe you'll be able to spare yourself from these unfortunate diseases. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the end of the first part of our revision class, and the second part will be coming up shortly, which consists of section C and D. That said, I want to thank you for your time. I want to believe that you were jotting one or two things, and by now you must have had some questions, some doubts, and you needed clarifications. Very simple. Jot them down. Some along the week, you can bring up your questions, your doubts, and we'll be able to clarify you. So that's it. We're looking forward to our next class, or our next revision class, which will hopefully occur maybe tomorrow, or I don't know, within the week. So until I come your way again, I remain your humble teacher, aka Mboko Prof. Thanks.